Yo, what's good, YouTube? It's the No Level Cap podcast. This week, we're talking about some of our favorite anime from the 1980s. Hey, yo, what's up, y'all? Like we said, we talking about the 1980s anime. Let's do a quick roll call. We've got the secret weapon of No Level Cap, Terrence Flowers. What's good, Terrence?
What's good, everyone? Ready to talk about some 80s anime.
Yeah, let's get into it. Next up, we got One Punch Man, Mr. Devin Butts. What's going on, Devin?
Good, man. I wasn't quite born around this time, but it was still some solid and some very legendary anime that came out. I watched some of them. Some of them was some really good ones. So about to get into this, man.
Man, y'all got me feeling old as hell because I was born in the 80s, even if I wasn't around to watch them. Like, I think by the time the 80s ended up, I was like 3. So
I was born right at the tail end. So, I'm technically there.
Right. I mean, none of us were old enough to remember them, even if they were airing until like way later. So, but yeah, the 1980s, of course, is like one of the most important decades in anime. That's where you get your Dragon Ball Z. It's where you get your Ranma 1/2. It's where you get Fist of the North Star. A lot of anime that would like. In fact, it's also where you low key the manga. At least this is where you get JoJo from. So there's a lot of like super top tier anime that still matter to us today and still resonate with us today. There's a whole genre that got wiped out between the 80s and now, but I mean, we talk about that later. We will be talking about that later because I'm gonna be talking about some of mine. But I would like to get some of y'all's favorite anime, y'all favorite 80s anime. So I'm gonna start with you, Terrence.
All right. So we're just going one by one, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just make sure. All right. So I will say that, and I said this off the podcast, but I'll say this for the podcast, is that the 80s period is a very interesting time for anime for me, just because looking at the 80s now, I realize that there's a lot of shows that I'm familiar with, but I never like actually sat down and watched them. Cause you have stuff like Dirty Pair. We're talking about Gunbuster. I forgot whatever. Oh, Vampire Princess Miyu. We were talking about that off camera. And yeah, so a lot of these shows I'm familiar with, but have I actually sat down and watched them? No. So it was kind of interesting to see how like this is like my blind spot for anime, like that time period. So I might have to go back and do some research. But but in terms of my first pick for what I have watched, I'm gonna go with Lupin the Third. And Lupin the Third is a very interesting anime because it's been going on for so long. It's almost like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Transformers of, well, I guess I can't really say the Transformers of anime because that technically is an anime. So I'll just say the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of anime in terms of it's been around for multiple decades, and each decade is kind of like revitalized itself in some way, or it's retooled some elements that made it relevant for a new audience. I know that maybe not the most recent movie, but the movie that came out, I think maybe last decade, whatever one had it where I think, everybody had like smartphones. And I think the premise of the movie was that Lupin couldn't really get away because anybody with a phone could pretty much capture him or something like that.
That was part 5, Lupin part 5.
Okay. I know that one was critically acclaimed. Like a lot of the Lupin movies are pretty well acclaimed, so people really like it. But for me, I got acclimated with Lupin from watching it on Adult Swim. I remember when they did the promos at that time, and I was like, this show seems kind of dope. It's about a thief, and just it was essentially like anime James Bond in a sense, except he's not a villain. He's not really an anti-hero. It's just like he's just a guy that's just living it up. But Lupin as a character is interesting. All of the side characters. I know Fujiko, she's had her own movies and a TV series, and the other characters, they've had spotlights on them as well. But yeah, I really like Lupin the Third. I really dug it watching it on Adult Swim. Have I seen all of it? No, just because there's multiple parts to Lupin, and they all have their own thing going on. But just from what I remember watching on Adult Swim, I really enjoyed it. And I saw one of the more recent movies, but like we were just talking about the one with smartphones, I remember that one coming out and a lot of people saying like, yo, this is definitely a Lupin movie to watch. And I think also like the animation was really good for it. Or is that the one that went 3D? I know there was one that went 3D, right?
There is one that's 3D. But of course, I mean, like Lupin's recently had more of a resurgence because he went away for a long time in like the 90s and throughout the 2000s. And then somewhere in the mid 2010s, they just started bringing him back with full series. Like, I mean, you've had like almost as many, not as many episodes, but almost as many series because there's a part 4, part 5, and a part 6 that have aired between 2015 and like last year. So
yeah,
there's a lot of Lupin stuff. Basically, is what I'm saying because I never got a chance to see the 3D thing, but I have seen a lot of the TV shows.
Yeah, I remember when the Fujiko TV series came out, that was a pretty big deal because people were talking about how good that looked and just how good overall it was. But yeah, I would definitely put Lupin as one of the better anime from the 80s. And if you haven't heard of it or if anything that I said sounds interesting, I definitely recommend that you check it out. There's not one of those anime where there's like a certain point you have to jump in. Like Lupin is pretty accessible all around. You could watch one of the movies and not have any prior knowledge of it and you'll be just fine. So yeah.
Man, I had completely forgotten about Lupin the Third. I do remember when Adult Swim added that because they added that and I believe Case Closed at around the same time period.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And they were both very like they were kind of the opposite of what I was looking for in anime because they were both really episodic. Like it's just like you just said, like there's no reason to like, oh, I'm gonna jump in on this episode. There are some episodes that are probably stronger than others, but there's no plot point that you have to catch and like arc that you need to get into. Like they didn't do anime like that, or at least not that particular anime like that. I low-key didn't think about it because like I said, I wasn't a fan until like more recently. I kind of liked it, but I didn't love it. And it's not until part 4, part 5, part 6 came out. And then like you said, the woman named Fujiko Mine. That's the
series. That's what it's called. Yeah.
That kind of kickstarted the rebirth of Lupin because like they it was like very artsy and cool looking, and it made people curious about the Lupin world again. And the next thing you know, they had brought it back. I kind of wish they had done more in that same vein as Fujiko Mine's show because like it was so different and it wasn't as campy. It wasn't as like silly. But I mean, like those characters, they were still very much themselves.
Her show was more like I think like noir-esque in a sense.
Yes,
very spy themed. Yeah.
Well, she was like not even she was just more of like she was herself, but she's more like what she would be in real life. Like if you had to be like a thief that's constantly lying to people, you kind of be kind of underhanded and a little dark and hard to trust and shit. And I think the closest they've come with that since then is part 5. That came out, I think, in 2018 or 2019. It was very good. Yeah, I love that show. At least, and I mean, like all of them are, at least worth a shot to check out. So, Devin, what's your first one?
So I'm gonna pick one. I actually watched the newer version first, and I actually, when I found out that it had an 80s version, I went back and checked some of it out. Guyver, the Guyver Biobusan Armor. This was an anime when I first found it. I was really intrigued by it. First, because I love the whole power armor dynamic of stuff. I'm a big fan of Mega Man. I love Samus, Power Rangers. This actually reminded me a lot of Big Bad Beetleborgs because they have like this kind of the horn thing going on. It's also a lot like almost like a symbiote because the thing it attaches to your body. And it's not just like a suit that you put. It's like this thing is attached to you. So yeah, when I found out that it was the 80s, I just went back and watched it. I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty interesting because I did not know the time I was watching. I think 05, 06, Guyver by Biobusan Armor. Did not know that was. I always had saw the live action stuff, like the Power Rangers type stuff with the suits, but I never knew that it was an actual 80s anime. And I actually like it. I think for the most part, the story seems to be the same. It's the same character show. He winds up finding this alien artifact and gets, this thing gets on his body. So now he's like the new Guyver. I think one thing that intrigues me about it is the fact that it's like I don't know if this is one of the innovators of this, but like in terms of body horror and like violence, this show is really violent. The OG and the new one, like they don't pull no punches. I think I remember even seeing like some of the live action was like the transformation was like really jarring. I want to say me and Sage, I think Sage was watching that with me. I'm like, well, this is seeing this like with live actors is kind of crazy. But like, of course, they have more free range with animation, and it's pretty rough. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. People limbs getting broken. You seeing like bones sticking out of arms and stuff like that. I almost feel like it kind of pioneered stuff for like I want to say Parasite, but a lot of later animes that were like really violent, a lot of body horror and stuff going on. There is like this element, like I said, of like there's these three Guyver units. So it's like these three people find them. There, there's a lot of like power dynamics going on. But yeah, this show was great when I watched it in the '06 version, and then checking out the '80s version was also dope. Because the one thing I'll say about the '80s, again, I was born in '90, so right at the tail end of the '80s, there's a lot of '80s anime that has like some really solid animation. And after like since we've been started doing the podcast, we've been going back and watching '80s movies and stuff like that. There was a lot of like I didn't realize it at first because when I was younger, I watched a lot of '80s stuff that I didn't realize started then because like I said before we started the podcast, my perception of stuff that I watched was like, oh, this came out as I'm growing up. Like I grew up in the '90s and 2000s, so I'm thinking as I'm watching it, that's when I thought it released. But I didn't know that a lot of this stuff was when you get deeper into anime. This stuff had been released years already in Japan, and now we're getting to see it in the U.S. So that's the same thing here. Like, there's a lot of like really well done animation, and Guyver's actually pretty good too. Like the style that they use, like when you see people transform, it's like it's really jarring. Again, like you see people's face like mutate. Like this one guy did this transformation, his whole head, like his eyes, like bucked out of his head. I'm like, it's kind of crazy, which I don't mind it because I like the body horror. They know on the podcast I like the sci-fi, the creepy stuff, so it don't really bother me. I know our good friend Rakeem, he was absent. When he watched Parasite, he was like, I can't do this, man. It's like it's too much. I'm like, hey man, it's just right for me, man. But yeah, God was along the same lines. It also reminded me of Power Rangers. I know it's not as dark, the Power Rangers that we grew up watching, but just like those power suits, the suits that they have these abilities, even a little bit of Iron Man, because he has his special technique where he takes off the chest plate and does the pectoral
Unibeam.
the pectoral unibeam. And I'm like, man, that's very reminiscent of Tony Stark right there. Even like I mentioned Samus, like even the shoulders are very like reminiscent. Even just the style of it and how dark it is, I almost feel like this could somewhat. I know it's a little far fetched, but they could maybe be some type of parallel between it and Yu Yu Hakusho. This because that was like a very dark show. When they got to the dark tournament, there was a lot of weird characters and weird creatures, and some of these like I think they call them I forgot Zone. I forgot Zone Morphs. I forgot exactly what they call
Yeah.
those creatures, but some of those look like they could come out of that world. So I got to shout out Guyver the Bob Boots and Armor because, like I said, I really enjoyed it when I found it. One of my favorite anime intros of all time. That intro is amazing on the 2006 version. And looking back at the '80s version, like this actually wasn't bad. I was kind of skeptical, like man, I don't know if it's gonna hold up like that one, but it's actually pretty solid. I gotta admit.
Yeah, Guyver is one of those ones that's I mean, it's got roots dating back to the 80s. I remember watching the live action one when I was probably like 9 years old, and I was like, oh, what is this? But like the body horror creeped me the
Yeah.
fuck out. And so I wound up changing the channel. Like anytime, like when you're scared, but you're still trying to watch it, so you change the channel. Anytime a scary part come up, you go and change back. You like, oh, okay. And it was a very strippy type live action thing, even though the second movie was just absolute garbage.
Mm.
But like the anime, it does have like the body horror stuff. I feel like you do see some of the roots of that show later on in Kamen Rider, because Kamen Rider at first is just like a straightforward
Yeah.
transformation, but there are a couple of series, specifically Kamen Rider Shin in like the early '90s, where he like it's not a transformation; he's literally just becoming the bug itself, like becoming like the grasshopper. You see his body
Yeah.
just start to change in the body horror stuff, and I feel like they pulled a lot of that from Guyver.
Yeah.
Um,
It also reminded me. I forgot to mention this, but when I first saw Guyver, Ultraman popped in my head for whatever reason. Just the style of the suit, the eyes, like it's not as like grotesque and dark, but it's still kind of like that, you know, it's a suit. It's like they almost like these Power Rangers, but like this is like more
I would
dark.
want to say that Ultraman is like the father of all Henshin hero because it is. I want to say the oldest, and
Yeah.
so like everything coming from like everything's inspired by Ultraman,
Mhm.
and it's like on that evolutionary tree, as it were. And so
Yeah.
like I guess they were just like, we'll do Ultraman, but scary as fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Horror.
I'm gonna say my first one. Oh man, let's just. I mean, like I talk about it all the time, and it's just a little cheating. But Pat Labor, the TV show, that one is legit. It's at the tail end of the '80s. It's like 1989, and it very much finishes up in like the early like 1990. But still, I mean, like there's an OVA that goes back to like the '80s, so I think it still kind of counts. It's just such a. I remember seeing Pat Labor when I was like a little kid, like when I was really more into comic books than I was in the anime. I saw it in like this book I used to buy called Previews, and Previews was just this gigantic, like phone book sized magazine that used to have every comic book and every nerd memorabilia thing that you could possibly imagine. And it was meant for like comic book shops. And the comic book shops would order like comic books and magazines and anime and action figures, figurines, statues, all that shit. And so like in there would be like the earliest parts of like anime fandom, like Animerica manga or magazines, and like or the early manga that was done by like Dark Horse, where they would flip the fucking pages and shit because we didn't read right to left to right. I forget whichever one. Y'all know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Mhm.
But they flipped it so that it would read like the way we read. And then like I remember seeing the image of the main mecha from the AV-98 Ingram from Pat Labor, and it just stood out so much to me because I was like, wow, this looks like it's like a police officer. It feels the giant robot. And I was like, man, that's creative as fuck. It had the fucking revolver and shit. I was like, oh man, that looks cool. What the fuck is this about? And then later, like as I got older and I was able to like, you know, find stuff, quote unquote, online, I was like, all right, well, let me go ahead and get this and see what it's talking about. And I just fell in love with it. Just because it's so, there's no other show out there like Pat Labor. It's almost an anti-mecha in a way. Like there's so many of the things that you would expect a mecha anime to do, it does not do. There is no mid-season upgrade. The protagonist does not trying to be the strongest pilot. The idea of a mid-season upgrade turns her off so much. She like breaks down into tears when the company, like she's working for the police. The police are like, hey man, it's getting time for us to go ahead and shelve this model of, you know, this robot. We're gonna have to get some new models. And she was like, I don't want a new model, I want this one. And it had nothing to do with like, oh, this is my friend that talks and is sentient and all that. She had just grown so attached to this piece of equipment that she had worked with for so long, it had become such an integral part of her life. And to be honest, she was like, you know, every other mecha fan out there. She basically got into the job because she wanted to pilot a giant robot. She finally got the giant robot, fell in love with it, and they were like, we're going to take it from you. And she was like, no. And they're like, we're going to replace it with something better. And she was like, I don't want better. I have this. And she had named it and everything. It's very cool, interesting way to do mecha. I fell in love with both the lead, but then also all the other side characters who felt very three-dimensional in a way that you're not going to get from a lot of other mecha shows. Or if you do get it, it's going to be like their anime characters. Like the characters in Pat Labor felt like people that you would go to work with. Like, okay, you've got this one dude, he's kind of quiet and he's very unassuming, but if you know, he get a little alcohol in him, he start complaining about his home life. He starts complaining about his wife and his kids, even though he has a very loving wife and kids, but it's like stressful to be a parent and stressful to be like a husband and be like the main breadwinner. And he'll start telling you about his problems. You got the one dude who's like a, you know, like all the other cops are normal or like regular, like decent people. And you got this one dude who's just like a really overzealous cop. And he's like really eager to shoot people and shit like that. And it's like, whoa, bro, you need to chill the fuck out. But that's kind of more real than we want to admit. But then they balance that out with humor because it's like he's always trying to like use, you know, excessive force, but they don't have the money for that. So he'll be like, hey, I want to fire this gun. And they like, hey, man, we can't afford to replace them bullets. So put that gun up. So There's all kinds of little elements like that, and it knows how to be funny. It knows when to be serious, and it pulls you into the characters in its universe without ever being so much of an quote unquote anime. And yet I man, it's just, I love that show. And so like I could have picked something else that was like more firmly entrenched in the 80s, but like any chance I get to talk about Pat Labor, I'm just gonna talk about it. So I had to go for it.
Man, started in the 80s. Hey, it counts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even though there's most of it's in the 90s, because like the sequels in the 90s, the sequel movies suck. So I mean, like really, it's just the OVA, which is in the 80s, the TV show, which is mostly in the 90s, and then like the sequel show. But whatever, I don't care. I was talking about it. Terrence, what's your second one?
All right. Well, I have a feeling maybe this is one you would have brought up, but if not, I mean, I'm gonna mention it anyway. And that's going to be Super Dimension Force Macross, or just Macross.
Okay.
I'm gonna go for it. Macross for me is interesting because I mean Macross has every right to be so much bigger in America, but just because of licensing issues and
fuck Harmony Gold.
Yeah, just no. I feel like no one really knows about Macross to the degree that they should. It's like if you know about Macross, you watch anime. So that like if I ask just a random anime watcher, somebody who just only like watches like shonen, like you watch Naruto, Bleach, whatever. No, not knocking on that type of person, but just if I ask them like, hey, do you know what Macross is? Chances are they're not gonna know what the hell I'm talking about. But
they don't even know what Robotech is at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, but if I ask you if you know what Macross is and you do, it's like, oh, okay, this person is into anime. Just because Macross is something you have to actually seek out. You can't, for the most part, like legally watch it in the way that you can a lot of other anime. But I mean, Macross is one of the pillars of mecha anime. Also, one of the ones that popularized like the space opera in a sense, is for anime anyway. But yeah, and also I guess just the not the idea of it, but it's one of the shows that really does the love triangle well. Most shows when you get to that kind of stuff, it dives maybe a bit more into like the harem territory, so it's like more than just two people. But in this case, it's you really understand why the characters in the show would like fall in love with each other and why it's such a heartbreaking decision to choose between like one or the other and stuff like that. Of course, you have all the politics that are involved with it, all the sci-fi with the different species involved, and just the world building that is in Macross that just makes it an amazing show. And I mean, you couldn't have all the other shows without the OG. So I have to give a shout out to the original Macross, because without it, we wouldn't have Frontier, and Macross Frontier is one of my favorite anime of all time. So I definitely have to give the OG its respect. We watched it on the podcast. We reviewed the first movie, and that was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that. So yeah, I would say that that's definitely one of my favorite anime from the 80s and one of the best anime from the 80s, period.
I'm not gonna lie. I would not have expected anybody to put Macross on the list. I do understand your reasoning. I do remember like Frontier is like a great film. I mean, a great series, and actually two great films. So, but yeah, like the OG Macross is one of my favorite anime of all time. It was one of my favorite even growing up when it was Robotech. There's just certain scenes that I remember, like the part where and I think the movie does a little bit of this particular scene. The scene where Minmay and Hikaru get caught in the oh yeah, it does do this when they get caught together in like the underneath the ship, underneath the city and shit, and they're just like, I remember that episode, watching that episode on TV at my grandmother's house on Toonami in like '99 or some shit, for the brief little period of time that they used to run Robotech. I used to love that, and I loved like the pineapple salad. That was like one of the oldest anime memes of all time.
Yeah.
Where like the dude, like what's my man's name? Roy.
Yeah.
Roy, he like goes out, fights the enemy, comes back, and he's like injured, but he's like too manly to actually just go to a fucking doctor. And so he goes to his date instead, and he sits down with his date, and his date's like, oh, I made pineapple salad. I'm gonna go bring you some of it. In fact, I think the episode's called Pineapple Salad.
Yeah.
and like she comes back with the food, and like he's just hunched over, just dead, and it's like that was so like just seeing that for the first time because like watching anime, like a lot of characters didn't die in the anime that we watched growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, like like later on, some of the anime like Cowboy Bebop and Trigun would kill off characters, but for the most part, like and even Cowboy Bebop, they killed Spike off at the end. Like the show is over with, and the last thing you see is him dying. Like, okay, but like you got to keep him the whole time. But like Macross, like they just killed Roy off in like the middle of the show. They was like, hey man, that's it for him. He was like, wait a minute, hold on. Like, because Dragon Ball would kill characters, but they had Dragon Ball. So I mean, like, they just go wish like,
there's always the Deus Ex Machina of the Dragon Ball. So
right, like, because the Saiyan saga opens with Goku like, oh, he fought Raditz, he died fighting Raditz, and we'll bring him back with the Dragon Ball. So already, like, death means nothing in that universe. You toss that shit out. But like in Macross, like, there wasn't no coming back. Like, he just died, and that was it. They had to learn how to get along without him. And like the protagonist, he had to figure out like, oh, what kind of person am I gonna be? Because like that was my mentor. He was the guy that I looked up to in battle and all that shit. And now I don't have him around anymore, and I have to figure this out going forward. And he had to lead a lot of the soldiers that were like Roy's soldiers before. And so like that was really cool. I know. Do You Remember Love is like a hard watch if you've never seen the OG Macross. Like for me, my brain automatically kind of fills in the gaps because I did see the OG first. And then I watched Do You Remember Love? But also, Do You Remember Love is just like one of the most beautiful anime movies, like probably my favorite anime movie of all time. Yeah, definitely my favorite anime movie of all time. Just because of how gorgeous the animation is, how well they hit the plot points, how much more of the love triangle they do. Because I feel like in the main series that like you get to a point where the love triangle is no longer a thing anymore. Like. Yeah. Hikaru and Minmay, they're supposed to be together, and then like what winds up happening is Minmay's career starts to take off, and she doesn't have time for him anymore, and he just winds up falling in with Misa, and then by the time Minmay notices, she's still like, yeah, but I got this career thing going, and so like she ain't got time to go back and be with this regular schlub in the military. But like in the movie, like I mean, y'all saw the movie, like that was the whole thing where they were all together, and like he was like trying to explain to Minmay, but Misa was like, hold on, where you going? What do you think you're going? And all this shit. And it really tugs at the heartstrings. And I fucking love that shit. Yeah. So great film, great TV show. I devoted a little extra time to that because that was on my list. Devin, what's your second
one? My second one is actually one that I caught this as a kid on Toonami at relatives' house because keep in mind, I didn't have cable or dish at my house. So most of the stuff I would watch was going over to relatives' house when I started school, get out the bus, and that's Ronin Warriors. Ronin Warriors, if you don't know, when I was a kid, Power Rangers had me in a chokehold. Anything that had a group of people whooping up on people with different colors and some suits on, I was with it. Like, I mean, you could even go to the Turtles. They were all green, but they had on different color headbands and stuff. Any type of group thing where they was whooping up on people, I wanted to watch it. So when I finally saw Ronin Warriors, I was like, what is this? I'm like, this looks cool. They got all these different weapons. They got the different colors. And just like, of course, you always like the red guy. He's like, that's the leader. Obviously, it got to be. He got the red on. So Power Rangers I think Power Rangers kind of started that trope. Like, got red on, he's got to be the leader. Usually like a fiery attitude, kind of, But yeah, I remember watching this. And again, I did not know that Ronin Wars was 80s anime. As I just said with Guyver, like watching this stuff when I got off the bus, I'm thinking this stuff is airing as I'm growing up. I didn't think this was stuff that's already been out to people that watched before. But man, it was a treat to watch. My cousins, we would sit down and watch it. Of course, Dragon Ball also had us in a chokehold. But like I said, man, when I was a kid, and I kind of got tired of it as I got older, like the Power Rangers trope. I guess it's just like a product of getting older. But I will say it was as I became like friends with Sage and one of our other friends, Nelson, they started showing me more Kamen Rider stuff. So I'm like, this stuff is actually still pretty cool, like the different suits. Because the Kamen Rider, they go all in. They do all this crazy stuff with the suits. And like I said, anytime I see people put on some suits, they have different weapons and they whipping up on people different. I mean, even Sailor Moon. That's another thing it reminded me of Sailor Moon. I was like, is this like the like a male equivalent for boys, like what? Because Sailor Moon, everybody watched it, but I'm just thinking like, oh, this is the guys. Like this is like the Sailor Moon for us, but also like that as well. I forgot that I actually watched that too. But yeah, man, that was I don't know, man. Those when I first watched those things, I'm like, man, I want to watch more of this. I'm gonna say this for later, but I really want to say something about Dragon Ball, but I'm gonna say that for later because that was like a really big inspiration for me, like finding interest in all this stuff. Because I love cartoons. You watch Ninja Turtles, GI Joe, all these things, but then you see something that's like it looks similar, but it's like it just looks more appealing to the eye. The animation is a lot better, a lot crisper. He's like most of the stuff is a lot more cool, like the context and what's going on. So my second one, I got to give to Ronin Warriors, man, because I watched it here and there, but when I first saw it, I'm like, this is dope, man. And again, it's 80s. I did not know it.
Ronin Warriors, like I said before the podcast started, is one of the most fascinating. What's up, Terrence?
Oh, I mean, you can continue. I'll get in later. I mean, we're still talking about Ronin Warriors. I was just gonna say something about it, that's all.
Oh, I mean, go ahead.
Well, Ronin Warriors was one of the ones I had on my list to just maybe have it as an honorable mentions. But I'm glad that you brought it up, just because it's one of those shows where I have like rewatched a bit of it recently. Like I remember some friends and we actually rewatched it. I think that was last year, maybe even the year before. And granted, there are some elements of it that have not aged well. Like the pacing is not very good at all. It's like they spend like half of the series like finding each other. Yep. And it takes a while. But once you get to like the later episodes, when things like really start to heat up and the Armor of Inferno comes into play, which is one of my favorite transformations of all time. Like Armor of Inferno, just when he takes a step back and then takes a step forward, and just the flames just come across, and just Armor of Inferno. Like I love that. But yeah, I was just going to say that there are some elements of it that haven't aged well, but it's still a fun watch to this day. So yeah, definitely put some respect on Ronin Warrior's name.
Quick question: Does Saint Seiya, is that?
So what I was gonna say was that Saint Seiya is the originator of
okay,
and it inspired not just Ronin Warriors, but a few other anime that like to use armors, like BTX used armors, but also Heavenly Saint Shirato. That's one of the more obscure ones. I don't think that ever came. I know that never came over here. That used armor. Like it inspired a whole wave of like 5 people that used armors, that armored up and shit. Like, yeah, Saint Seiya was, and it's funny because Saint Seiya wasn't popular in America at all. Yeah. It's huge in like I think Brazil and in Latin America.
Yeah, I was gonna say Latin America, they fuck with Saint Seiya. It's kind of like how King of Fighters is there for them, where it's like but we got the Street Fighter cabinets and they got the King of Fighters cabinet, so they love King of Fighters in comparison to us, where we're more Street Fighter. So I think Saint Seiya is kind of the same way in a sense.
Yeah,
definitely.
Because I didn't hear about Saint Seiya until like a while. Like I was like, wait, what is this? This looks like Ronin Warriors, and now they make sense.
Saint Seiya came along for us, I think, in the late 2000s.
It was like toward the end of Toonami's run, kind of.
Saturday Toonami.
Yeah, Saturday. You're right. Yeah. Saturday Toonami. Yeah.
Because Ronin Warriors, it's funny because like I remember watching that on Animation. No, well, not it might have been Animation Station. I used to watch it in 3rd grade because it came out on Toonami when I was in 6th grade, but 3 years prior I had gotten a chance to see it on Animation Station on Sci-Fi in the mornings, and I had all the action figures and shit. I had Real of the Wildfire, Sage of the Halo, I think I had Sai of the Torrent. I did not have Kento of the Hard Rock. Yeah, the Kento of the Hard Rock, and I definitely had Rowan of Stratos. I had all the motherfuckers. I was heavy into it because I was, anytime there was any character with some armor, I was there. Like I didn't give a damn. Like that's why I was an Iron Man fan long before anybody knew who the fuck Robert Downey Jr. was, or he was still just kind of a joke because of the stuff he did in his past. Long before all of that, I was a huge Iron Man fan, huge War Machine fan, Steel fan, and that shit transferred over immediately to anime. So like as soon as I saw them kids armor up, and they was already wearing armor. Like they already had armor, and then they added more armor. I was like, oh yeah, this is the show for me. I couldn't help myself. I was huge into Ronin Warriors for like that year or so that it was on Animation Station. And then when they brought it to Toonami, I was even more hyped because now I get to show my friends. I'm like, oh yeah, we all watch Toonami. Wait till y'all see this. and I was at that show. I loved that show growing up.
Yeah.
As far as like how well it holds up, I couldn't tell you. It's been ages since I've seen it.
Yeah.
It's not really at the top of my list of things to go back and see because I'm like this ain't gonna do nothing but mess up.
Nah,
my
don't
memory.
let it stay in your memories, like Sephiroth
Yeah.
says. Just let it be a memory.
I don't want to ruin that one. Like I'm probably at some point gonna go back, and this ties in because Toonami. I'm probably at some point gonna go back and rewatch Gundam Wing because I know that shit was trash. But like I'm not going back for Ronin Warriors. As far as my second one, interestingly, Terrence kind of took my second one, so I have to pivot a little bit. I'm gonna go with Zeta Gundam. This isn't really necessarily one of my top ones, but I do like it. It's so different. And Yoshiyuki Tomino is just such an interesting creator because only he can come up with a character who starts out kicking the crap out of like a military officer. And that's just how it goes for the rest of the series. Because I was thinking about this earlier today as I was doing research on this. And it's like it opens up with this main character, Camille Bidan. And he's just like living his life as like a regular high school student or whatever. And like he's talking to his female friend. And then she says the name Camille. And then like this military officer's like, Camille? But that's a girl's name. And boy, that starts like that technically was the reason. I took that
personally.
He really took that personally because that technically was the reason the whole fucking UC Titans faction fell down because he joined the AU, became a Gundam pilot, and it was all downhill for the Titans and that dude from there. Because like as soon as he said, I thought I heard Camille, but that's a girl's name, Camille snapped, ran back to him, and like actually beat his ass. And then from there, like he had to be like held down by other military officers, so you lost because you couldn't win the one-on-one. And then from there, Camille like proceeded to get into a Gundam, and despite being far less experienced, whooped that man's ass in every episode he appeared in. And it was so fucked up, like because like by that point, it's such an interesting story because we all saw the Mobile Suit Gundam TV show. Oh, not the TV show, but like the movie. We all saw that, and we know that it was like the Federation and the Zeon. Well, by the time you get to Zeta, which is the sequel, the Federation has kind of become corrupt, and they're not who they used to be. And like now a new faction has to rise up to face them and kind of like bring not necessarily peace, but at least like bring some fairness back to the galaxy, get the Federation to chill the fuck out with these Titans because they basically just like super cops and they just bullshitting across the land and shit. And so they build up the AU, the Anti-Earth United Government. Yeah, that's right. They build up the AU. Camille joins the AU, and he effectively is on the opposite side of what side Amuro used to be on. And he winds up working with Char. And there's so many like twists and turns to that shit. And it's just such a fascinating show. Not just from like how like it's bold to basically say, well, the hero of last series has now had to flip sides. And then the hero of the new series is already on that side. And so it's like they're technically on the villain side, even though they're not really part of the Zeon, but they are fighting against the Federation. So it's like they're technically the villains now. And that's so creatively bold, like such a creatively bold direction to go in. And then at the same time, like there's so many unique ways that Tomino handles his dialogue and the way he writes his characters. And there's certain scenes where you're like, why would you say that? Why would you say something like that? Like Camille, in short order, because he joins the AU, loses his parents, loses his mom and his dad. And like one of the members of the AU is like, hey, just because your parents died, don't think we're going to go easy on you. I'm like, what? Who talks like that to a person? Like, what kind of asshole says shit like that? And then that's just like the start of the nonsense. Like Camille, despite being the ace pilot, is like a little shit in a way that Amuro never was. Like he's such a spoiled brat. He talks so much shit to everybody. And then eventually one of the members of the AU, not even like a pilot, just like a dude funding the shit, kicks and beats the shit out of him. And I mean like to such an extent that you like, y'all know he's like the ace pilot winning you a lot of these fights, right? Like, you know, he got to get back up and pilot. They ain't give a damn. They beat the fuck out that kid. I was like, holy shit. Like, there's so many things that they do that you just wouldn't expect. And it just makes for a wild, fun ride. Even if it's not one of my favorite animes, it's definitely one of my most fun 80s anime to watch. I enjoyed it. Devin, give me your third, bro.
So I wanted to pick a movie for this one, but I just remember the core memory of mine, and I think this had to be the moment I was like, okay, anime's for me. So I might have told this story, and it's gonna be Dragon Ball slash Dragon Ball Z. Um, I was what was like a Sunday morning, Saturday morning, like on Channel 4, Channel 9, just like basic regular channels. And all of a sudden, the episode of Dragon Ball comes on, and I'm like, we ain't got this channel. What is this? Like, I'm like, I'm with it because I'm just like, I'm normally just some regular stuff that I ain't trying to watch some news. I'm just like, and I finally remember it was an episode where Goku would turn to the Ozaru form, and Yamcha of all people had to cut his tail off. That is a core memory I will never forget. That was literally the first time I ever saw anything Dragon Ball related. And I think a few other random episodes came on, and I was just like, I just sat there looking at TV when it went. I was like, "What's that? I want some more of that. What's that?" And man, which is kind of weird now because Yamcha is so useless now. And when it gets to Z, it's like he actually had some. He actually did something. Okay, cool. He cut off Goku's tail. And I know the Dragon Ball is one of those. It's like it's the everybody answer. But just the fact that I remember that core memory, I'll never forget it. That's one of the reasons why I have to put it up there. I haven't watched the entirety of Dragon Ball, but like I said, that memory right there, and then also the fact that Dragon Ball Z itself was an '80s anime. Again, back when I'm watching Goku turn Super Saiyan, I didn't realize that. I'm thinking again, this is current anime. So it affected me in a way that's just like I got to see more of this. And I don't even know how old I was. Maybe like how old was I? Maybe 6, 7, if that. I might have been in like Head Start or maybe like kindergarten, but I vividly remember that, and that just changed my perception. Because like I said, I watched Ninja Turtles, all those the conventional cartoons, American cartoons. But when I saw that, I'm like, there was something about it. I knew it was different, and I knew I wanted more of it in my life. And like I said, it's been ages, and I've never watched that episode again. But I vividly remember Goku tearing up stuff, going to Ozaru, and Yamcha cutting his tail off. And shout out to Yamcha, because that was
Was
probably the last
Pilaf in
time.
that?
I believe so. I think it was
I know
Bulma was
exactly what
there
episode
too.
this
Yeah,
is.
yeah, and
Pilaf was all over the place in Dragon Ball, so
Yeah.
he probably was.
Well, I mean, like I know what episode he's talking about
Mhm.
specifically because I
Oh, you
had
mean
like
was
the
like
VH
Pilaf in it?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I had like the VHS tape of this. It's
Mm.
like episodes 11 through 13. It's like the
Mm.
end of the first major arc of Dragon Ball,
Yeah.
where like it's the episode where Oolong jumps in front of the dragon and is like, I wish for like an extra soft pair of panties or whatever.
Oh
the
yeah,
fuck.
because he wanted to take that wish from Pilaf. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then Goku like transforms into Ozaru form and just starts wrecking shit. And then they have to find a way to get their tail off of him. And then that's
Yeah.
the arc right before he goes and trains with Master Roshi.
Mm. And see, it's even such a weird thing because like that was like right in the middle of like a lot of stuff. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I just see a giant ape on the screen and a green. At the time, he was wearing green instead of orange, which I kind of like that outfit, the old school Yamcha outfit, a little better than the orange. I don't know why he just decided. I guess it was just like everybody's wearing regular orange at Kami House, so
He
I
started
guess
training with Kami, so he like decided to take that on.
yeah. I kind of wish he'd maybe like, let me go back to my old swag, man, because he kind of looked cooler in the outfit. Had the longer hair too. The sword, I don't think the sword was his, but I was like, but
The
yeah,
sword
man,
was because he was at first he was the desert bandit.
Yeah.
that's right, because he had like a sword that was kind of like a broadsword.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of looked like what's the character from Soul Calibur, Young Sung or Hwang? He kind of give me those
Young
vibes.
Sung. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've never forgot that. I'm 33 years old, and I don't even know if I was double digit, but I never forget that. So I have to give Dragon Ball that credit. I think I said once Z, I had to give it his credit, but when I thought about it, I'm like, I got to give Dragon Ball because if I had never saw that, that unlocked all I need to know about anime. I saw that and I was like, I want some more of this, man.
It's so weird because I remember buying that. I don't know what because I was like a Dragon Ball Z fan, just like everybody growing up. I was like obsessed with it, and so like I wanted to see what Dragon Ball was like, and so I bought that tape and got a chance to see that episode and watch Yamcha like save everybody from Goku just destroying everything as the giant monkey king. Because I mean, like, it wasn't really Ozaru form at the time because there was no concept of the Saiyans yet. Like, Toriyama hadn't thought that shit up. So he was really just the monkey king, and he was just transforming into a giant monkey and just wrecking shit. And so that was a great moment, and like I can see how that could pull somebody in because it definitely had me pulled in. I think I watched that tape a bunch of times because like as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, yeah, I remember that shit because I watched the hell out that tape. As far as like you just catching a random episode, that's how it was with kids, man. Like you just had to catch shit as you caught it. Like whatever when it came on cable, it's like, all right, I guess I'll watch it, and then you figured out from there.
That's pretty much how I caught Sailor Moon.
Like, I don't even know how we caught it because we just had basic like 4 channels. I'm like,
came on Dragon Ball came on syndication for a while.
Yeah, because it was on like Fox, right?
Yep.
Because like the same thing as Sailor Moon, like a lot. I do remember quite a number of those shows came on like basic television before it went to Toonami or like the other channels.
It was like Channel 9. I think for us that was like NBC.
Yeah.
I mean, like just regular syndication, so you can land anywhere, as long as they like buy the package for it or whatever. However, I don't know exactly how syndication works, but like as long as they're willing to pay the licensing fee, they like, hey man, you can air this. It's just more content for them. And yeah, I definitely remember it aired on Fox where I lived. Sailor Moon, I specifically remember airing on Fox. I remember hating. You say what?
Oh, I was gonna say, okay, because I still to this day was trying to remember what channel it was because I know I would watch Inspector Gadget and then Sailor Moon would like either come on before or right after it, and those were my 2 big shows right there.
It may have aired on multiple networks, but I specifically remember airing. In fact, I remember airing instead of Power Rangers, which is why I hated Sailor Moon for a very long time because I was like, I had made you get up early in the morning because you're going to make time to watch Power Rangers. I'm all excited. I'm like, yeah, let's go. I'm finna watch Jason and Tommy punch some monsters in the mouth. And then, like, I specifically remember 2 of the Rangers came on and said, look, we're not going to be on today. Sailor Moon's going to come on this week. This new show that y'all going to like it. It's called Sailor Moon. And then that song started up and I was like, what the fuck is this? This ain't what I want. This ain't dun, 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 dun. This ain't that. This some other bullshit. I was heated. I was like a little 6-year-old boy. I was mad as hell. And I mean, like to just have to wait another week because like you already got to go through the school week. This is the thing you've been waiting on all week. And like all of a sudden they're like, hey man, you ain't getting to see that shit. You finna watch something new. And I mean, you don't want nothing new. You want the same shit you've been watching for the last year or so. But yeah, it aired on Fox for sure. And I definitely remember Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z because I remember seeing some random episode of like Fake Namek. Y'all remember Fake Namek?
Fake Namek?
Fake Namek.
Like before Gohan and Krillin landed on Namek, they landed on some fake ass alien planet.
Oh yeah. Was that technically filler?
Ain't no technical. It was definitely filler.
Okay, it's just that I don't remember if it was because
I mean, like if I most of the time in Dragon Ball, like Toriyama was a very point A, point B. We ain't going to no C and D, and then we get back to B. None of that shit. He was just let's just get to the point. And then like they would add filler, like I think the training shit for the most part was filler. I think Fake Namek was filler, like all that shit. Because like if you go back and watch Dragon Ball Kai, none of that shit is there.
Yeah.
And Kai is basically just like we just adapted the manga straight. So,
man, I forgot about the Fake Namek they went to. Yeah.
The saddest thing about this.
What's that?
The saddest thing about this, I got that dopamine hit and got hooked, and I stayed there every day. That same time, it's gonna come back on. Never came back on.
Well, if I remember correctly, that might have been what you might have called as the last run of that, because that's the last episode of that arc, and that was the last episode that was dubbed for a very long time. Like there was no more like that because I couldn't buy the next VHS tape either. I bought that VHS tape, and that was the last dubbed episode of Dragon Ball until it came back on Toonami in like 2002 or some shit.
Yeah, because that's why Toonami could say never before seen episodes. Really, never before seen to us.
Yep. It world premiere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Terrence, what's your third one, bro?
Well, since Devin went with Dragon Ball, which I figured one of us was going to. I mean, we have to, respect to the GOAT, especially with the passing of Toriyama. But the other anime that I'm going to go with is. This is part of a a manly era right here. What they used to call manime. I'm talking about Fist of the North Star or Hokuto no Ken.
Me?
You know what? This works because Rakeem's not here to say this.
Yeah.
And he definitely would have picked it.
Yeah, he surely would have. I made sure that I picked a number of ones just in case like Rakeem was going to step on my toes because I know he was going to. But yeah, have to shout out the GOAT, Fist of the North Star. Like that anime, like I said, it's part of the pack of manly anime or like manime that as people used to call it, like stuff like Go-Go 13, Berserk, City Hunter. Like that's part of like the manime spear. Essentially you have like this manly main character that's kind of like not, I would say kind of like James Bond-esque in the sense that he's the type that he's like he knows when to ask questions and he knows when it's time to jump in and throw hands essentially, but he can also, you know, get the girls whenever he wants to, but for the most part he kind of keeps to himself. In the case of like Kenshiro, is like he kind of just keeps to himself. He is very much a quiet character and he only throws hands when he has to. But yeah, Fist of the North Star, that anime, it's stupidly iconic. There's so many references to it today. I mean, we still have the meme of, you know, you're already dead, nani? Or, you know, of course, the Japanese translation, omae wa munshinderu, nani? Yeah, I mean, that's iconic in its own right there. But Fist of the North Star, I remember seeing it on, I think, Encore, one of the premium channels, like in the early 2000s. That was one of my first, I know like it, Hellsing and a couple of others were like some of my first mature anime, like anime where you actually see like body parts getting ripped off, heads exploding, blood, and that kind of stuff technically happened in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, but because it was on Toonami, it was censored, so we didn't see a lot of the blood or the more
they're okay. I can see their parachutes.
Yeah, we pretty much got the dumbed down version of, which hey, for kids that's totally fine. You know, you don't need to be seeing no heads exploding and like blood all over the place. I mean, that's just, you know, hey, it is what it is. But yeah, Fist of the North Star, it didn't hold back at all. I remember watching this and being like, oh, anime can be like this? Like it can be this violent, over the top, and like mature. It's like, yo, this is the kind of stuff I want to watch more of. And that sent me even further down the rabbit hole of being interested in like anime as a medium, just because outside of like the Toonami stuff, I learned so much about the more obscure series and how they dove into like more serious plots and stuff that was a bit more for like teenagers or adults. And yeah, I was just so fascinated by anime at that time, just finding the more that I found out about it, the more that I fell in love with it. And yeah, Fist of the North Star was part of that. I hadn't seen all of Fist of the North Star or like all of the series because I know there's multiple, but if we're just talking about the one from the 80s, I've seen enough of it to know what's going on. It's been a while since I've watched it, but it's still one of those, it's like the pillar of action anime. If you take Fist of the North Star away, you lose like so much influence, so many shows that have been influenced by it easily. So yeah, I have to definitely give a shout out to that.
What was Mad Max made?
Mad Max the movie?
Yeah, well, just when did they come out?
Ooh, the OG is like what, 60s or 70s?
Okay, never mind.
I don't know. Hold on.
Because like that, because the first Mad Max is pretty old. Because I know that Thunderdome, like that's 80s,
79,
right? Okay, 79. Okay.
I just mentioned that because I know Fist of the North Star kind of had like a kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Raiders type vibe.
Yeah, like that.
Spikes on the shoulder pads and stuff. Yeah,
the post-apocalyptic.
That's it. Yep.
It's funny you mentioned Mad Max. I remember watching that like years ago, and that movie is nowhere near as, like, to me personally, I feel like that movie is nowhere near as good as like people kind of give it credit. It's like it's really the later Mad Maxes that get so much better and dive more into like the post-apocalyptic
stuff.
I
didn't know.
What?
There's only one dude that's done all the Mad Max films.
Yeah, he's the same director, has done it since then. Yeah,
I had no clue. Like I thought, okay, that was some old director from back in the day. No, it was a young director at the time who did the OG one.
Yeah,
and he just aged and kept making them.
That's why we don't really get that many of them. It's like that's why it's like so few and far between the series. Like the last one was Fury Road, and we're just now getting Furiosa this year, and that was like almost 10 years ago. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's
I
a side
remember,
tangent, but you know.
Yeah, like it's related because like Fist of the North Star very much is Mad Max inspired.
Yeah.
That's the kind of vibe that they were going for when they made Fist of the North Star. And without Fist of the North Star, you don't get JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh yeah.
Like you can look, you take one look at Kenshiro and you're like, okay, that's where that comes from.
He was the blueprint, definitely.
He was absolutely, and actually, I would say I'd have to check this, but I'm pretty sure he's also the blueprint for my third one, which is City Hunter. Terrence brought this one up earlier. I picked City Hunter because like that was another anime that I'd seen growing up. If not in those previews magazines, I saw him in like people bringing it up online or something like that. Oh, actually, you know where I probably saw it? Back in the day, you used to buy VHS tapes, and like at the front of the VHS tape, they'd always have like the previews and show you like a whole bunch of other shit before they actually show you the episodes of whatever you were watching. And ADV used to show like City Hunter OVAs, like Bay City Wars and Secret Service and all these other ones. And so like I was like, oh, this looks kind of cool. This character looks cool. And so I always wanted to check it out. And so in college, I had this 1 year where I was gonna like watch 500 anime. No, not 500, 50 anime in one summer break. And I didn't quite get there, but I did watch like over 30, like 35, 36 anime. And one of the ones that I watched was City Hunter. And at first I was like, oh man, well, actually the first few episodes are kind of dark and serious. And it's like the main character, Cyber Ryo, he's like this super experienced, quote unquote, sweeper. And he just handles cases for anybody that needs, you know, whatever taken care of, whether it's being a bodyguard, whether it's getting rid of somebody, he just handles it for him. He tends to take cases from beautiful women, but he like, you know, his partner is always trying to keep him on task. His partner is like his age, another guy. And it's like this very serious, grounded story. And then about 5 episodes in, his partner gets killed. Like a mission goes bad, his partner dies, and like Ryo has to deal with that. And he also has to take care of his partner's little sister. And then that's when the show becomes what you know the show to be today, where it's like him and like this older guy and this younger girl. And, you know, she's in love with him and he's in love with her, but they don't want to admit it. And so there's this, you know, romantic, unresolved sexual tension going on. And then also Ryo's kind of like not a playboy, but kind of a playboy. Like he mostly hits on girls in a goofy way. And it's the goal basically is to take the women's mind off of whatever case he's taken off of them. Cause usually the case is kind of scary. It's like, oh, I've got a stalker, or, oh, I've got these strange occurrences in my life. And you're the person that I'm turning to. And so he would hit on them in ways to take their minds off of it and kind of be like silly and goofy and shit like that. But at first I was like, oh man, I don't know about this show. Like I watched the first episodes, really loved it. And then like Kaori, the chick, the younger sister shows up and I'm like, man, I don't know about this show. Like it's kind of goofy now and it's not as fun. But somewhere in the 20s, it settles into this rhythm of being like the old 1980s, you know, hyper talented guy handling cases every week on TV, like the sitcom, well, not sitcom, like the action sitcoms we used to watch growing up and shit like that. And like it just hits this really strong vibe, and like it perfects its formula for the remainder of the run in a way that was just engaging in every episode, even though it was very episodic. And I tend not to like those, like I said earlier, it still just hit a right chord with me, and it made me become nostalgic for like all the shows that I grew up watching as like a child. And like it also helps that Ryo's like really fucking cool when he wants to be. Like he's goofy around the girls, but when the mission starts, he's like turns it on in a second. And he's like this crack shot that can make the most insane, like, bro, they should just tell us that you have superpowers type shots. Like he's out here shooting fucking helicopter blades and stopping the helicopter with his fucking one hand cannon ass gun that he's got. And it's like, bro, there's no fucking way you could make this shot. But of course he's like, you know, special forces, well, not special forces, but like he was a guerrilla fighter, super trained, he's hyper capable and shit. And so like it was just really enjoyable. Even though it was episodic, I just got into the rhythm of it and I fell in love with that show by the midway point towards the end, all the way until the end. And so like, yeah, one of the great 80s anime. Without it, you don't. I wouldn't say it's super inspirational, like as far as like a lot of shows take from it, because it's more inspired by Hokuto no Ken, just because like Kenshiro and Cyber Real, if you look at them, you're like, okay, I see the inspiration just immediately. But it is just one of those like unforgettable franchises of the 80s and into the 90s. And it's just a top tier anime. Anybody got any last ones for the lightning round?
I think I'll put Akira up there.
Oh, absolutely.
Akira was like this mythical creature for a long time before I watched it, because I heard so many people talk about it. There's like, man, this is kind of an interesting watch. It's like some horror type stuff. It's kind of, weird stuff going on. But that kind of intrigued me even more to watch it. I finally watched it. I look back at it like the parts, especially like the ending parts with Tetsuo. He's like, his body just goes to this mass of flesh. There's like some horror movies that I remember coming out like in the 2000s. And again, like this is probably, I don't know if the most, but it's definitely one of the most like referenced movies, especially the bike. The bike is like
the bike slide is in everything.
Yes,
everything.
Even
anime
Final
and not anime.
Yes. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII.
I'll put it this way:
like,
it was in Jordan Peele's last movie. It's that iconic.
Yeah, it is.
Dang.
The bike is like
they had Kiki Palmer doing the Akira slide. Man, it was incredible. Yeah.
You talking about the Alien movie?
Yeah.
Nope.
Shit. What's it? Yeah. Nope. Yeah. Nope. Yeah.
Wow.
I'll send it to you later. You can see it.
Wow. So yeah, I liked it. Like I said, it was just an interesting movie. Very like, weird, like a mature type thing. But yeah, it's one of the most referenced movies. I think even Final Fantasy VII, like the the motorcycle with the little section you do, is very similar. Because they have the scene on like the bridge where they like the gang of the clown gang, and it's like, this is very I feel like this world could almost coincide with Final Fantasy VII. Like a lot of stuff is going on. I know there was a lot of political stuff going on with the movie, like the government and things like that. I was like, man, this kind of reminds me of Seven in a bit, and that's one of my favorite RPGs. But yeah, man, Akira was, like I said, for the longest time before I actually watched it, it was like a mythical beast. Like, man, you gotta Akira's, man, this is such a, one of the most interesting anime movies you'll watch. And I was like, it definitely was when I watched it. So I got a shout out to Akira.
Okay.
I guess the only other one that I would mention, we did briefly bring it up, is Saint Seiya. That was on my list because that is definitely one of the anime that inspired a lot. It doesn't seem to go away. There's so many Saint Seiya series that is crazy. But I remember when it came on Toonami, and I really got into it, and I hate that it got to a certain point in the series where they had to cut it off. I can't remember exactly how far in, but I was disappointed when it ended. I haven't watched any of the other series since then, but at the time, I heavily enjoyed Saint Seiya, so I definitely would add that to the list of great 80s anime.
Toonami got into this weird part towards the end where a lot of the shows they licensed, they couldn't finish.
Zatch
like
Bell.
I was just about to say Zatch Bell, Yu Yu Hakusho, Prince of Tennis. Like there are a lot of shows they picked up, and it like they just didn't have the juice to keep going, and so like they just had to wrap it up. And like even Yu Yu Hakusho, it finished at like, I think everybody has this memory of like it airing at 4 or 5 in the morning.
I remember setting my VCR for every single Friday night to record it. Yeah.
Yep. And then like they did that last run to finish out the last arc, and then that was it. They were like, all right, that's it. And then they never aired Yu Yu Hakusho again. They may have brought it back when Toonami had its revival for a little bit. I don't know, because they brought back a bunch of shows out of the blue, but like definitely at the time they were like, yeah, this is it. We're just trying to get this our obligation done to it, and then that was we're done with it. But yeah, Saint Seiya, I tried to get into Saint Seiya, but I had one problem with it. I was like, y'all don't throw no punches, y'all don't throw no kicks, just your special move. Amen. And then when that don't work, yep. And when that don't work, you just do the special move again, huh? and you just
Man.
keep trying it until it works. Okay, I just, as somebody that likes fight scene choreography, it was so, it broke the show for me in a way that really bummed me out, because it is one of those shows that has like that top tier pedigree, and like so many people talk about it with such reverence. I was like, man, please tell me that at some point they stop that shit and just have like regular fights, and then like the signature move is used at like the right spot. And like every time I've asked people, they're like, no, that's not how it works. They just keep spamming their special moves at each other. It's
It would
like,
be like Dragon Ball just did Kamehameha the whole fight.
it would be like if you watched the Street Fighter match and all they did was
Stop
just
spamming
Hadouken back.
Hadoukens.
Like, man, hell no. But like, if somebody don't do a throw or a Shoryuken or something else, or like some type of regular normal, like, what are we doing? Like, I couldn't get with it. And I tried, because I also tried to watch its sequel. And then there was like, because there's one where it's like a brand new cast and it's like Gold Saints, like Saints. Seiya and his friends are elevated to Gold Saints, and then like you see the new Bronze Saints. And then there's one where it's like the Saints are all women and all this other shit. And I tried multiple times. I just never could quite click with it. I guess if I had to mention one last one before we wrap up the show, it would be Dirty Pair. Terrence also brought this one up. I have seen a little bit of Dirty Pair. I love the music from Dirty Pair. It's just got some of the best, most iconic openings in anime, certainly from the 80s. And then like Kei and Yuri are just such likable characters, and it's such a cool setting in that it's space, but before we knew anything about science, and I say we, I mean like the creators and shit, like before creators tried to do anything scientifically realistic, it's just a bunch of like, if it looks cool, we're gonna do it type science fiction, and I love that. They're just out there in the middle of space dealing with all these different elements, like a computer that gains intelligence and decides like, oh, y'all are trying to get rid of me, so I got to get rid of y'all first and shit. And like all these type of cool cases that they go on. It's just such a fun show. I've watched the first half of it, and then I've also watched a few movies as well. And so I really love that show. Have always meant to go back and finish it up and finish the franchise up, just to see, the series as a whole, and actually have an opinion on what shows are better than the other. Like, is the OG show as good as the OVAs and all that shit? I don't know. I do want to go back and check that out at some point. But that's going to wrap this week up. I mean, y'all know the drill by now. Hit the subscription button on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on TikTok. Tell all your nerdy ass friends and family about us. And do me a personal favor. Have an excellent week. Peace.